Blake Lively just panicked after a judge delivered a shocking ruling about her deposition because her texts and footage directly contradicted her claims, and instead of fixing things, she escalated the situation by subpoenaing more than 35 small creators, which triggered global backlash as critics, media, and even the court accused her of dishonesty and abusing influence. Blake, who spent months portraying herself as a victim while hiding behind legal chaos, still could not face consequences. And when it was finally time to show up, she postponed her deposition again, making it the second delay, because whenever accountability appears, she disappears even harder than someone who vanishes after matching online. This was not a quiet delay behind closed doors, but a public moment where everyone was watching, and she walked away the same person demanding transparency and justice, refused to answer basic questions, and now her entire public image, from witty celebrity partner to stylish activist to outspoken voice, is collapsing. Major outlets like Daily Mail and Radar Online, which once supported her, are now labeling the situation a massive public relations disaster, and industry insiders are no longer whispering but openly saying this could end her career. When even loyal supporters begin leaving, that signals serious trouble. Meanwhile, her aggressive actions online have intensified as she targets creators, including smaller voices with limited reach, having already subpoenaed multiple YouTubers and users, many with very small followings, some under 20,000 followers and others earning nothing at all, raising questions about why she is pursuing individuals with minimal resources instead of addressing larger issues. She even targeted a licensed attorney who publicly stated she never made any money from coverage, yet was still treated as a threat, further escalating criticism. Some subpoenas reportedly arrived after legal deadlines had passed, leaving recipients without fair opportunity to respond, which critics argue undermines basic rights. Public relations expert Eric Schiffer described the strategy as extreme overkill, saying it makes her appear overly aggressive and damaging to free expression as she seeks personal data, including addresses and financial details, from people who simply discussed her actions online, which raises serious ethical concerns about power misuse, because promoting empowerment while pursuing critics legally creates a clear contradiction between message and behavior. Returning to July 17th, the date she was expected to appear for questioning by Brian Friedman, she ultimately did not attend, continuing a pattern of avoidance that has fueled ongoing controversy and intensified scrutiny from both the public and legal observers who are closely watching every move she makes as the situation continues unfolding, with increasing pressure mounting around her decisions and their wider consequences for her reputation and future prospects within the entertainment industry and beyond, as debates about accountability, fairness, and influence remain central to the ongoing discussion surrounding her actions and their impact on others involved in this developing situation, which continues drawing widespread attention across multiple platforms and audiences globally, while reactions keep evolving rapidly, with each new development emerging in public view and shaping perceptions further each passing day as scrutiny remains intense and ongoing for everyone involved in the situation. Today, overall context remains unresolved. She canceled it just hours before it was supposed to happen, even though her legal team had already traveled to New York, and this marks the second time she has done this same move. First it happened in June, then again in July, and now no one really knows when she might actually show up. Maybe September, maybe Christmas, maybe even sometime in 2026, when she decides to launch another overpriced fizzy water brand. And her excuse this time was that she did not feel safe, which honestly sounds strange, because she has spent most of her life walking red carpets surrounded by cameras and paparazzi, and she has even hosted major events like the Met Gala, so the idea that she suddenly feels unsafe sitting inside a conference room filled with lawyers does not really add up, and it seems more likely that she simply did not want to face someone who would not treat her gently, like a magazine cover sheet situation. And to make things even more confusing, her legal team attempted to blame the dismissal of Jed Wallace as the reason she could not attend her deposition, even though that situation had absolutely nothing to do with her own requirement to show up, since the judge never instructed her to skip anything and instead dismissed Jed purely based on jurisdiction, which is a completely separate matter, and using that as an excuse is basically like trying to justify skipping jury duty in New York because of a parking ticket received in Texas, which clearly does not make any sense, and one of the few Lawyers willing to speak honestly about the situation, Ron Zambrano immediately recognized what was happening and described her actions as a delay tactic disguised as drama, because the reality is that the moment she sits down under oath, the entire narrative she has built around being the victim could fall apart very quickly, and that brings everything to the unexpected turn involving Jed Wallace, because for months she attempted to convince the court that he was somehow orchestrating a coordinated smear campaign using bots, but the major issue with that claim was the complete absence of evidence, since there were no credible screenshots, no convincing documents, and not even weak proof, just assumptions and speculation, which eventually led Judge Louis Lyman to step in and put an end to it by dismissing Jed from the case, due to lack of jurisdiction in New York, since Jed is actually based in Texas, and this means that her legal team spent months trying to force a case into a courtroom where it legally did not belong, which resulted in a significant waste of time, money, and effort, only for the judge to point out that the case could not even proceed there, and to make matters worse for her, the dismissal was issued with prejudice, which prevents her from simply refiling the same claims in New York and forces her to start over entirely in Texas if she wants to continue pursuing the matter, which would require new lawyers, new filings, and convincing a different judge that the case has merit, which is far from guaranteed. And beyond just the legal setback, this ruling also disrupted her entire deposition schedule, because several individuals who were expected to participate were suddenly no longer required, while others had already made travel arrangements, turning the situation into a complete logistical mess. And ultimately, the responsibility for that confusion falls on her, because building a case on weak legal grounds often leads to consequences like this, and now the situation stands with a series of damaging developments, including a jury decision that has affected her public image, a delayed deposition that raised questions about her willingness to participate, a wave of subpoenas that made her appear overly aggressive, and a legal case that seems to be unraveling rapidly. And instead of focusing on clarifying her position, it appears she is attempting to silence critics, which has not gone unnoticed by the public, as perceptions continue to shift and the narrative around her changes significantly, with many no longer viewing her in the same positive light and instead seeing a celebrity struggling under pressure. While the unfolding events continue to draw attention and scrutiny from audiences everywhere, and inside the courtroom, Judge Louis Lyman has shown clear frustration with the ongoing situation, as his patience appears to be wearing thin, and his reactions suggest that he no longer finds the proceedings entertaining but rather exhausting, especially when her legal team attempted to highlight her celebrity status as a factor, expecting some form of consideration, only to be reminded firmly that fame is temporary and does not grant special treatment, which serves as a direct message that the court expects seriousness, efficiency, and respect for the process rather than theatrics or unnecessary delays, and reinforces the idea that regardless of public image, everyone is held to the same standards within the legal system, and attempts to rely on status instead of substance are unlikely to succeed as the case continues to develop and the pressure surrounding it grows stronger with each passing moment. This is not some simple battle, but more like Goliath versus Goliath Part 2, meaning both sides are powerful, influential, and frankly exhausting the situation entirely. And if we are being honest, Blake did not confidently walk into court, but instead stumbled into it, almost as if she was holding up a mirror to herself. And when the discussion turned toward requesting additional deposition hours, the response was an immediate and firm refusal, because federal law clearly limits depositions to 7 hours, and that is the standard with no exceptions for dramatic storytelling or extended narratives. This is not a romantic comedy set or a director's cut of a personal storyline, and Judge Lyman made that boundary very clear, drawing a line that left no room for negotiation, and it was a moment that many observers found refreshing. Ron Zambrano also added perspective, explaining that granting extra time in this case would open the door for everyone else to demand the same, leading to a chaotic legal environment where depositions could stretch endlessly far beyond reasonable limits, turning the system into something unmanageable and inefficient. And the judge emphasized that his courtroom is meant for structured legal proceedings, not a space for managing celebrity egos or personal theatrics, making it clear that the rules must be followed, the work must be completed efficiently, and the process should not be treated like a publicity platform. While frustration continues to build within the courtroom, it is also spreading rapidly across the internet, where criticism is intensifying as Blake expands her actions beyond the United States by attempting to subpoena individuals located in Europe, ignoring strict data protection regulations that govern personal information in those regions. Her legal team reportedly tried to obtain user data through major platforms without fully considering the serious legal implications under European privacy laws, which are known for imposing extremely severe penalties, including massive financial fines, and this approach quickly faced resistance as companies pushed back and warned that complying with such requests could violate international regulations and lead to significant consequences, further complicating matters. Reports surfaced suggesting that her team initially denied the legitimacy of certain subpoenas only for those claims to be challenged publicly, creating additional confusion and damaging credibility, leading critics, including legal analysts and media commentators, to raise serious concerns about the broader implications of these actions, especially when smaller content creators with limited audiences became targets of legal pressure, which many view as disproportionate and unnecessary rather than serving justice. The situation is increasingly being interpreted as an attempt to dominate the narrative by suppressing opposing voices and discouraging public discussion. Content creators across various platforms have begun expressing alarm over what they perceive as the misuse of legal tools to intimidate individuals who simply commented on publicly available information involving well-known figures, and ongoing legal matters, raising important questions about free expression and the appropriate use of legal authority. As the controversy grows, the impact on her public image has become impossible to ignore as perceptions shift dramatically from a previously admired figure associated with elegance, success, and relatability to someone now facing widespread criticism and skepticism. Public relations experts have described the situation as deeply damaging to her personal brand, noting that the contrast between her previous messaging around empowerment and her current legal actions creates a disconnect that is difficult to reconcile, particularly when critics highlight the targeting of individuals with significantly fewer resources, which undermines the authenticity of her public stance. Even some former supporters appear to be distancing themselves as online discussions lose momentum and engagement declines, reflecting a noticeable change in sentiment across digital communities. While major media outlets that once portrayed her positively are now publishing critical coverage analyzing the unfolding events and their potential long-term consequences, with some suggesting that efforts to control the narrative may ultimately contribute to further reputational decline as the situation continues to evolve under intense public scrutiny, with ongoing debates surrounding accountability, influence, and the balance between protecting reputation and respecting open discourse remaining central to the conversation. Irreversible damage in this context means facing serious difficulty securing future brand deals, because major luxury companies are unlikely to associate themselves with someone involved in legal actions against smaller creators while also being accused of making misleading claims, and this concern is further reinforced by commentary from legal analyst Emily D. Baker, who is widely recognized for her coverage of high-profile cases and who stated that this wave of subpoenas could become one of the most significant legal miscalculations seen in celebrity disputes, which is a strong assessment, but one that reflects the growing perception that these actions have amplified criticism rather than silenced it, because instead of reducing attention, every attempt to suppress voices has drawn more visibility to those same individuals, leading to increased support and larger audiences for many creators involved, demonstrating that controlling online narratives is far more complex than anticipated, and highlighting that widespread curiosity and discussion cannot simply be restricted through legal pressure, while at the same time each step taken by her legal team appears to have intensified scrutiny rather than easing it, as courtroom strategies, privacy concerns, disputed claims, and highly publicized filings continue to draw criticism and contribute to a broader sense that the situation is becoming increasingly difficult to manage as public sentiment shifts noticeably, with supporters distancing themselves, critics becoming more vocal, and those previously targeted gaining credibility through the attention they have received, illustrating how attempts to suppress commentary can sometimes produce the opposite effect and strengthen opposing voices, particularly in highly visible situations where public interest is already elevated. Meanwhile, within the legal environment, there are indications of growing impatience from the court, as well as increased focus from observers across media platforms. where reactions range from critical analysis to open skepticism, while online communities continue to engage with the situation in ways that ensure it remains widely discussed, reinforcing the idea that once an issue reaches this level of visibility, it becomes challenging to control its direction or limit its impact on reputation over time, and this ongoing exposure has contributed to a transformation in public perception where earlier positive associations are being replaced with more critical viewpoints, shaping a narrative that continues evolving rapidly as new details emerge and conversations expand across different audiences and platforms, maintaining consistent attention on the developments and their implications for everyone involved, including how actions taken at key moments can influence long-term credibility and trust, while the broader discussion also touches on themes of accountability, transparency, and the balance between defending oneself and respecting open discourse in a digital environment where information spreads quickly and reactions form almost instantly, creating a dynamic situation that remains fluid and closely watched as it progresses further, with no clear resolution yet in sight, and continued debate expected as more perspectives are shared and analyzed over time. That's a large number to claim, especially when there's no clear public breakdown of the financials to back it up. Her legal team argues that her brand suffered because of negative publicity, but critics say that explanation ignores a more basic possibility, that consumer demand may have played a bigger role than online controversy alone, particularly when a product line is heavily tied to a celebrity image during a highly publicized situation. At the same time, the contradiction being pointed out is that during the period she was allegedly experiencing major reputational damage, she was also starring in and executive producing a major film, which performed strongly at the box office. The project received audience turnout and commercial success, and her presence was central to its marketing. This creates debate over how damaged her public image actually was if her work continued to attract viewers and generate revenue. Her legal team also requested access to financial records to demonstrate economic loss, but the judge denied the request, calling it irrelevant. Critics argue that this raises questions, because if financial harm is a core part of the claim, then detailed financial data would seem important to evaluate it properly. On the other hand, her team maintains that the focus should remain on the alleged conduct rather than private financial disclosures. The dispute also extends beyond film earnings into her business ventures, particularly her personal brand products. She is not claiming that her acting career collapsed, but rather that secondary ventures were impacted by reputational harm. Critics counter that market performance depends on many factors, including pricing, competition, and consumer interest, and cannot be attributed to a single cause without clear evidence. As the case continues, the situation has shifted from a private legal disagreement into a much larger public debate. What started as a dispute is now being framed by some observers as a wider cultural conflict involving speech, influence, and the use of legal tools in public controversies. Supporters of the creators involved argue that the attention has amplified their platforms rather than silenced them, while others believe the legal strategy has drawn more scrutiny than it resolved. Meanwhile, public reaction has intensified across social media, with commentary from creators and analysts increasing visibility around every development. The more the case progresses, the more it becomes a subject of online discussion, making it difficult for any single narrative to dominate the conversation. The court itself has been portrayed by observers as increasingly focused on keeping proceedings structured and efficient, emphasizing rules and limits rather than extended arguments or reputational framing. This has added to the perception that the case is being treated strictly as a legal matter rather than a media story. And the broader narrative. Critics argue that attempts to control online discussion have had the opposite effect, increasing attention instead of reducing it. Supporters of the legal actions, however, argue that protecting reputation and addressing harmful claims is a legitimate use of the legal system, even if it generates public backlash. Ultimately, the situation remains unresolved and highly contested, with competing interpretations of the same events shaping very different conclusions, depending on perspective.